There are men who change history through ideas, through armies, through money. And then there are men who change history simply by refusing to accept the world they were born into. Pablo Escobar was born on December 1, 1949, in a small Colombian town called Rio Negro. Poor family, invisible people. His mother was a schoolteacher. His father was a peasant farmer. They were not destitute, but they were invisible. And Pablo decided very early that invisibility was the one thing he could never accept. That decision would cost the world thousands of lives. The family moved to Medellín, into the barrios, the working-class neighborhoods climbing the city's hills. Living proof of everything the Colombian economy had failed to provide. Medellín in the 1960s was industrializing fast, but sharing its wealth almost not at all. The factories grew. The slums grew faster. By his teenage years, Pablo was already stealing tombstones, running contraband cigarettes. Small crimes, but executed with a precision most adults never develop. The people who knew him then all described the same quality. Not violence, not cruelty. Charisma. An almost magnetic ability to make people feel that following him was not just profitable, but correct. He was also developing a political consciousness that would later make him one of the most dangerous men alive. He concluded that the Colombian state was not failing its poor. It was deliberately excluding them. That conclusion gave Escobar something most criminals never have: a narrative. A story that made his crimes feel, to himself and many around him, like justice. By his early 20s, he had moved from petty crime into car theft. Operations sophisticated enough to attract very serious attention. And then came the product that would change everything. Not just for Escobar, for Colombia, for America, for the entire world. Cocaine. A white powder whose market was about to explode in ways nobody could fully anticipate. Escobar studied the cocaine supply chain with obsessive precision. Where were the inefficiencies? Where was the margin being lost? The answer he arrived at was the same answer every great monopolist in history has arrived at. Control the infrastructure. Own the supply chain from beginning to end. By the mid-1970s, he had formed the operation that would become the Medellín cartel, something qualitatively different from anything Colombia had ever seen before. He was 26 years old, no education, no connections, no inherited wealth, only the product, the vision, and the absolute willingness to do whatever it required. What it required was a willingness to use violence not as a last resort, but as a business tool, precise, calculated, deployed when necessary. The boy from Medellín had found his product, his method, his market. What came next would shake the foundations of two nations simultaneously. The American cocaine market in 1975 was consuming roughly 50 tons per year. By 1982, 800 tons. The demand exploded. Escobar was ready. The early smuggling routes were improvised, cocaine hidden in luggage, in clothing, in human mules. Escobar saw what every great entrepreneur sees in an inefficient market: opportunity. He began using private aircraft, small planes flying below radar, landing on improvised airstrips. Hundreds of kilograms per trip instead of grams. The economics changed overnight. He developed relationships with corrupt officials in every country along the supply chain: Panama, the Bahamas, Mexico.
The corruption was not incidental to the business. It was the business. At its peak, the Medellín cartel was smuggling 80% of all cocaine consumed in the United States. 15 tons of cocaine per week crossing into America. The money was so vast it created its own problem.
10% of all cash, roughly $2 billion a year, was simply lost, written off. At his absolute peak, Escobar was earning an estimated $60 million per day. Not per year, per day. Forbes magazine listed him as the 7th richest person in the world in 1989. A drug lord from the Medellín barrios, alongside CEOs and inherited dynasties. But Escobar understood something pure criminals often miss. Money alone does not protect you. What protects you is legitimacy. In the barrios, he built housing for the poor, funded football pitches and schools. He was Robin Hood with a private army, and the slums loved him for it. In 1982, he was elected to the Colombian Congress as an alternate representative, a drug lord sitting in the national legislature. His political career lasted 2 years before the justice minister publicly exposed his criminal record. It was a brave act. It was also a death sentence. The justice minister was assassinated in April 1984. The message was not subtle. The message was the point. Escobar offered Colombia a choice that became infamous in the history of organized crime. Plata o plomo, silver or lead. Accept our money or accept our bullets. Thousands of Colombian officials faced that choice. The vast majority took the silver. The Medellín cartel's annual revenue at its peak between $20 and $30 billion. The entire GDP of Colombia at the time was approximately $40 billion. He had not built a large criminal enterprise. He had built a parallel state, with its own revenues, its own army, its own social programs. Colombia in the 1980s was a country where 2 sovereignties existed simultaneously, and only one of them had been elected. The rise was complete, the empire was real, and the war was about to begin. Because the United States of America had finally decided it could no longer look away. And when America decides to look, the world changes. In 1984, Colombian police discovered Tranquilandia, a cocaine complex deep in the Amazon jungle. 14 laboratories, 13 tons of cocaine ready for shipment. Escobar lost $200 million in a single day. His response was not to negotiate, it was to declare war. Escobar feared one thing above all others: extradition to the United States. In American courts, his money meant nothing. His army meant nothing. He called himself and his allies Los Extraditables. Their slogan? We prefer a grave in Colombia to a prison in the United States. Between 1984 and 1993, the cartel murdered more than 4,000 people. Police officers, judges, journalists, politicians, presidential candidates. Each death was a message. Each message had a recipient. In 1989, Escobar ordered the bombing of Avianca Flight 203, a commercial passenger aircraft. 107 people killed. The same year, a car bomb exploded outside Colombia's secret police headquarters. 700 kilograms of dynamite, 70 dead, over 1,000 injured. Medellín's murder rate exceeded 500 per 100,000 people at its peak. The United States today, approximately 5. Medellín was 100 times more deadly.
And yet Escobar maintained genuine popular support in the barrios throughout all of it. Because the people being killed were not from the slums. They were the people who had always oppressed the slums.
In 1991, facing military pressure, Escobar negotiated a surrender, but only to a prison of his own design. La Catedral, the cathedral, built to his specifications above Medellín. Football pitch, bar, jacuzzi, his own bodyguards. Not a prison, a fortress. From La Catedral, he continued running the cartel, continued ordering killings. The Colombian government had negotiated the most expensive surrender in history and received nothing. In July 1992, when the government attempted to move him to a real prison, he simply walked out, through the front door, into the Colombian night. What followed was the most intensive manhunt in history. The Colombian police, the military, the CIA, the DEA, U.S. Special Forces. For 16 months, Escobar stayed one step ahead of everyone. A man with $5 billion and nowhere safely to spend it. His downfall came from his love for his family. He was calling his son regularly, and every call was being traced. On December 2nd, 1993, one day after his 44th birthday, they found him. A middle-class house in Medellín. The raid lasted less than an hour. Pablo Escobar was shot dead on the rooftop while attempting to escape. The most wanted man in the world, gone. In Medellín's wealthy neighborhoods, people celebrated in the streets. In the barrios, where he built schools and houses, people wept. The cocaine trade Escobar built was not an anomaly in the global economy. It operated by the same rules of supply and demand, the same logic of market share, just without legal constraints. A kilogram of cocaine cost $1,500 to produce in Colombia. On a New York street corner, $150,000 to $200,000, a markup of over 10,000%. No legal industry in human history has ever generated margins like that at such scale. The war on drugs created those margins and handed them to whoever was willing to absorb the violence. This is the economic paradox nobody in official Washington wanted to state clearly. Prohibition does not eliminate a market. It prices out legitimate operators and hands it to criminals. The United States spent approximately $1 trillion on drug enforcement between 1971 and 2010. The result? Cocaine became cheaper, purer, and more widely available than ever before.
In 2012, HSBC, one of the largest banks in the world, was fined $1.9 billion for laundering cartel money. No executive went to prison. The fine was less than 5 weeks of profit. The UN estimated the global illegal drug trade generates approximately $500 billion per year, the third largest industry on Earth, after oil and arms. Escobar was killed in 1993. The Medellín cartel collapsed. Did cocaine consumption fall? No. Within months, the Cali cartel. Then the Mexican cartels. You cannot arrest your way out of a market. You can arrest the people. The market remains. Escobar did not create the cocaine market. He did not create the demand. He simply saw it more clearly than anyone and built the most efficient supply chain to serve it.
His estimated net worth at death, approximately $30 billion. Most of it was never recovered, buried in walls, hidden in farms, still out there somewhere. Still compounding, still waiting. Nobody knows where, Nobody knows how much is left. Pablo Escobar has been dead for more than 30 years. His face still appears on T-shirts sold in tourist markets worldwide. He has become, in death, something he always wanted to be in life. A symbol. The question is, a symbol of what? The comfortable reading: he was an evil man who built an evil empire. His death was justice. That reading is not wrong, but it is incomplete, because it locates the problem in a person rather than in a system. And when you locate the problem in a person, you solve nothing. Escobar was a product of specific economic conditions: extreme inequality, a global illegal market, a prohibition regime that guaranteed enormous margins to whoever absorbed the violence. Remove any one of those conditions, and Escobar either does not exist or operates at a fraction of the scale. But none of those conditions have been removed. The system continues to produce Escobars. Different names, different countries, different drugs sometimes, same logic, same outcomes. The war on drugs was never really about drugs. It was about markets, about who controls them, who profits from them. Alcohol was once illegal in the United States. Prohibition created the first modern organized crime networks. When it ended, they diversified. The infrastructure does not dissolve. It adapts. Escobar understood he was not in the drug business. He was in the market business. And markets are immortal. The individuals who serve them are not. Today, Medellín is studied worldwide as a model of urban transformation. Cable cars connecting the barrios, libraries in the poorest neighborhoods, murder rate down from 500 to less than 20. The city Escobar made infamous became, improbably, a case study in what happens when you invest in excluded communities. Not a body on a rooftop, a cable car in a barrio. The real question Escobar's life forces upon us is not whether he was good or evil. It is, what does a society owe to the people it has structurally excluded? And what will those people do when the answer turns out to be nothing? History has answered that question many times. The answer is always the same. Pablo Escobar answered it with $30 billion and 4,000 murders. His answer was wrong. Catastrophically, unforgivably wrong. But the question he was answering was real, and it is still being asked. In every barrio, every favela, every neglected neighborhood on earth. Subscribe to History Burns, because the past is not finished. It is the architecture of the present. The names change, the logic does not. And if you do not understand the logic, history will shape your future without your knowledge.